The NHO Show.
You got that pressure.
And we're back. It's a wonderful, sunny, blistery day in southern Ontario. We won't tell you exactly where we are because, fun fact, Colin and I are not in the same place.
Unfortunately, yes. But welcome to the NHO Show, either way. It's your co-host here. I'm Colin, and we got Storie.
Hey, what's going
Patching
on?
in.
What did you say? What was that?
I said we're patching in.
We're patching in, making it work. Thank God for the internet.
It's a wonderful thing, you know?
It really is. It really is. You know what else is a wonderful thing?
What is that?
Matt Duchene trade. It's
We might as well start with the big news of the week. It's been a really big week in hockey for many different reasons, which we'll touch on. But I think the biggest thing on most people's minds is the Matt Duchene trade. And I mean, there's been a lot of analysis about it already. Everyone kind of knows the breakdown of it, so we won't really touch on that too much. I know you you know that I'm pretty close to this trade. I'm a big Colorado fan myself, so I just wanted to add a few things that I think most media outlets and analysts are kind of ignoring. How do you feel about the trade, first of all? You think Duchene's going to do well in Ottawa?
I was upset to hear about it, just because Matt has been such an Avs fan. He's been an Avs fan since he was a kid, and what a dream to be able to grow up love. And like that's not it. It's not like I was a Maple Leafs fan growing up, and then I got to play for the Maple Leafs. Like that's really really cool, but I couldn't imagine for a kid who grew up liking the Avs. A kid from Halliburton who grew up idolizing the Habs to go and play for that team and then play with them for so long. He had just such big roots in it, so I feel bad for him. I think it's a better scenario for him in the long run. He's going to be with a team where he can actually succeed, and get an actual chance at the cup. So.
Yeah, I'm actually really interested to see how he does in the playoffs, since he really only has two short playoff experiences to speak of, and I'm not certain that he's going to outperform what Kyle Turris did for the Sens last year. So I don't really know how much they upgraded in that area, but I think ultimately everyone's pretty happy with the trade. I think Ottawa's taken the biggest risk, obviously, and for kind of a slight upgrade. I think what I wanted to mention is that the media really kind of gave it to Joe Sakic for the last year or so and just ripped on him for not being able to make a deal. And I was, like, myself included, I was kind of losing faith. I always thought that I'd be happy with the return, and I am, but I don't think anyone expected for him to do as well as he did, to get 7 assets from one, and Samuel Girard already looks really good on the ice, so it's already going to pan out a little bit this year, and they've got a guy Kamnev that's going to come up and play for them for the rest of the season. So we'll see how he does. But the second thing I really wanted to mention is the true losers, because like I said, I think every team is happy with what they got, but no one's really talked about the losers in this trade, and we talked about last week the Carolina Hurricanes and how they've kind of they're not bold enough franchise to make that big trade or big decision. And I think they really missed out here with Duchene. Them and the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think Columbus is a team that could use one more extra little push up front and dynamic forward, and they missed out on Duchene here because they had the pieces to get it done. I thought he was going to go to Columbus the whole time. So Carolina and Columbus are the big losers, in my opinion, in this trade, as their Eastern Conference rival gets better.
Well, there you go. We'll see what happens in the long run. Well, do you think either of those teams have any other cards in their pocket going forward for the rest of the season?
Well, I mean, I think Carolina, who knows? Like I said, they're loaded on D, and I think they have to make a deal at some point if they continue to suffer in mediocrity. But Columbus, I definitely see making a deal. I just don't know when or with who. But I do think they add a top six centerman if they're able to. But it's just whoever it is, it's not going to have as big as an impact as Duchene did because no one is going to move with like that caliber player the rest of the year. I don't think. Um, yeah, and Columbus obviously is the team that's closer to the top, and not they missed out on Kyle Turris as well, who also could help them. So it's one of those things where they kind of I think they missed an opportunity, and we'll see. They're a great team, obviously they're doing well, but we'll see in the playoffs if they come to regret this decision not to give out some futures to help them win now. It's always that balancing act, you know.
It is. It is. It's always a balancing act. It'll be it's an interesting balancing act for Matt and Kyle Turris because it's not like they could just take a break from their teams.
Yeah, and it's pretty funny that like right away that he plays Colorado back to back in Sweden.
Yeah, that's happened a few times where I think I feel like I want to say it happened to like Nick Kyprios or something or something like that. Like I feel like I talked to him about it a while back where, what is that feeling to get traded and literally go across the dressing room, like across the hall to the other dressing room.
Yeah.
It's
I'm sure it's happened a couple times. Yeah, it's just weird. And just how it happened too, how he got pulled off the ice. Like we haven't seen that in years.
That hasn't happened in a long time. Usually it happens kind of on an off day or, a player isn't on the ice and it happens before. It happens during practice a lot, which makes sense. Like, you want to pull you don't want your player to get injured. It makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. And just the fact that it was a three-way trade as well. I like the last time we haven't seen the three-way trade. It's one of those things that I think is really tough in the salary cap era, but like kudos to everyone involved to get it done because it's just a lot of details and it's hard to make that many parties happy with things. So I don't know the next time we're going to see another three-way trade. I think that's the reason why Joe Sakic did so well though is because he involved three teams. Mm-hmm. Because I mean he wasn't ever going to get 7 assets from one team for Duchene alone. So what happened was that he traded Duchene to Ottawa for Turris and then a bunch of like picks and prospects, and then he flipped Turris to Nashville for picks and prospects as well. So I think they did really well, and I think Nashville also the big winners this year because they gave out no one off their roster. I mean Girard had played a few games, but going like once they're healthy, he wouldn't be, and they filled a hole, a big need for them in second line center. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But this Colorado fan's happy.
I want to just quickly go back to a point that you made about Matt Duchene and sort of that longer season and the lack of playoff experience he has. Yes, he has lack of playoff experience, but just remember that he played World Cup and he did World Championship last year.
Yeah. And he's played in the Olympics, so he does have some big game experience. That's a good point.
I think he's got. I think he's in a better shape to perform in the playoffs than other players.
At the same time, though, he has never been the guy to lean on in those situations, and it'll be interesting to see how he deals with the pressure, especially in a Canadian market, to perform at that point because he was always third, fourth line on Team Canada, and I think he is best as a complementary player and not the go-to guy. I mean, in Ottawa, that's kind of more Mark Stone, Eric Carlson, but he's still going to be looked on, especially after this trade, to really step up this year. So there's a lot of pressure on him. So we'll see how he deals with it.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's shift our focus a little bit to Hockey Hall of Fame inductions because that's sort of been one of the hot topics this week. And there's always talks about who should be in the Hall of Fame, who's being inducted, and the class of this year is pretty intense. Paul Kariya,
Yeah.
Teemu Selanne. There's a pretty amazing group of guys and players who are being inducted this weekend. But I want to talk a little bit about current players, if they were to get, current players today who probably won't ever get inducted due to lack of hardware, because they're really, really great, amazing players, but they just don't play for amazing teams or competitive teams, or just like don't have, are kind of in the middle of their career, and probably by the time that team gets good, they'll be at the end.
Right. Anyone on your mind specifically?
Oh, you read my mind. Mark Scheifele. Mark Scheifele. I think, and I say that Mark Scheifele actually may have an opportunity to be inducted, possibly more for his life after hockey and what he does when his career is over on the ice. Then I think if he, and there's a very high likelihood that Mark will become a GM or a coach or something like that post hockey. I think he'll be very, very involved. So I think he's actually more likely to be inducted at that point than he would be inducted as for just his playing career.
That's a very good point, Star. I didn't even think of that. Yeah. The funny thing is about the Hall of Fame is it's really kind of hard to judge. I mean, what their criteria is. Like, longevity is important because, as you saw with Mark Recchi and everything, his point totals. Mark Recchi he never led the league in scoring or anything like that. He had a few over 100-point seasons, which is nothing to sniff at. But like later on in his career, his point totals really dropped off. So it's how do they like weigh that as opposed to their peak of their career? I mean, Mark Recchi's in there because of his Stanley Cups as well. So that brings us back to the point. Who knows if Winnipeg's going to win the Cup during Mark Scheifele's run there, or if he goes somewhere else later on in his career and wins the Cup? Who knows? But I think you're right in the fact that he's obviously really young, and it's early in his career to even start talking about Hall of Fame. But we're big believers in him, and I think he's like that kind of caliber player. But he's never going to win the Art Ross Trophy because he's going to be against McDavid, etc. The rest of his career. He might never get the Rocket Richard. He could get a Selke. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of individual awards he gets, and if it stacks up enough to get in there. So, but I like your point that he might have a better chance after his playing days are done.
Mm-hmm. What about you? Do you have a person or a player in mind that may get overlooked in the future?
Yeah, well, I think he's one of the guy that I thought of. He's probably one of the most underrated and under talked about guys, but most consistent guys is Nicholas Backstrom in Washington, because he's as steady as they come when it comes to point production and just kind of what you're going to get from him game in, game out. And he's one of the best centermen in the league that, like I said, no one talks about. But because he's kind of in his prime right now, and Washington can't seem to get over the hump, at least Stanley Cup wise. We'll see if he has the criteria that matches what the Hall of Fame's looking for in the end. I think what's going to hurt some of these guys too is lack of Olympic participation, at least this year. The NHL, because gold medals go a long way. Obviously, I'm sure they'll take into account some World Cup and things like that. So if you win a gold medal, it's unfortunate that such an individual honor comes down to how successful your team is. Because while you play a part in that, a lot of guys don't really have a say. Like, another guy I was thinking is Claude Giroux. He's a great player in his own aspect, but is he good enough to make the Hall of Fame? And I don't think his team's ever going to be good enough unless he, like I said, he goes somewhere else later in his career, which I see kind of as a likely scenario with him.
Now, question, do you think PK Subban would ever make it to the Hall of Fame?
See, that's another tough one because, like I said, it all comes down to how they view criteria and what they're looking for. PK is and has been a top 5 defenseman in the league offensively. I've always had my reservations about PK because of his defensive play, and he's never going to be the guy that you throw out there in the last minute to really shut down the opposition. But at the same time, he's a unique talent and one of the most dynamic players in the league. So I think he will need an individual. I guess he's got a Norris, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that right there. That right there might be good enough for him to get in there. Like, if you are a Norris Trophy winning defenseman, I don't see why you wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. But, I mean, that Norris is also questionable in my mind, but we won't get into that. Well, I mean, I guess that brings us to a guy like Shea Weber. Because Shea Weber, I think, has been robbed of the Norris, like, once or twice, and I think Subban was that year that he got robbed. But he's coming to the decline of his career, and that Montreal team does not look like they're trending in the right direction, and he's got a really hard contract to move, so it's likely he stays there for the remainder of his career, and he's got some gold medals, which will help his case, but doesn't have that Norris Trophy. So, I don't know. It's, like I said, it's really interesting to me to see how they value certain things, because longevity is important, but injuries can just be bad luck sometimes. And you look at two guys, Thornton versus Ryan Getzlaf. Joe Thornton's got a higher point per game, but he's got a gold medal, but he does not have those Stanley Cups that Ryan Getzlaf does. And because of that, I'm sure Getzlaf will get voted in before him. Big Joe's going to retire sooner. One of the other things too is it depends on who your competition is that year, because a lot of guys like Lindros and like Recchi this year kind of were delayed getting in because their competition every year was just too strong to get voted in. So that's another really important factor I think we haven't mentioned yet. But yeah, that's my thoughts. I mean, do you have any more players that you think of?
Not right off the top of my head. I think just Scheifele was that one standout. Yeah. Maybe, you know what, like, I feel like maybe even Carlson.
I think
to an extent, but I mean, I think Carlson might have a better shot of getting into the Hall of Fame than Scheifele.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, he's got the Norris, he's got the Olympic gold. I see him as kind of a shoo-in just because positionally, Erik Karlsson is like the top 5 in his position, whereas Mark Scheifele, he's not there yet. He's arguably very close, but we'll see. Because center is just a really tough position to excel at. So it'll be interesting when we're old and gray
to look back on this,
sitting there looking at maybe even having the votes to get people into the Hall of Fame. You know,
ooh, that would be fun. I don't even know how you get that coveted vote. For listeners, if you have a thought on a player who you think may get overlooked, a current player who you believe may get overlooked in the future Hall of Fame inductions, tweet at us at the NHO Show. Let us know who you think might get overlooked, why, or agree with us, disagree with us, and tell us
do you
why.
think we're totally out to lunch with some of these guys? Because, I mean, I hadn't had this thought when I was 10 years old, and it's hard to, I wasn't following hockey as much, so it's hard to know at this point in some guys' careers what exactly is going to happen, but it's an interesting thought, you know?
It is. It's nice to think. It's nice to think about. I like thinking. Okay, so we've talked Hockey Hall of Fame. We did touch a little bit on tournament play and that international play. So I want to shift us to the Karjala Cup, which is going on right now, which unfortunately Canada just lost to Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, we just can't win against Sweden. Although it will, in the Koryala Cup, it's no NHLers are playing. And Canada has never won. I don't even think they've gotten a medal.
No?
I was trying to find it today, and but they've never won, which is an interesting tournament, which is an interesting thing to think about when you think about hockey and you think about Canada as this powerhouse, and also when you think of certain tournaments as kind of Olympic previews.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically this one this year, like the Koryala Cup gets played every year. We just never talk about it because it's a whole bunch of players who aren't in the NHL. I mean, and by we, I mean just like people in North America, because we don't really need to talk about it that much because it really has no bearing on the NHL and hockey and what's going on every single night.
Right.
It's a cool tournament. You can see it's a great chance to check out players who may have gone to the KHL that year, or have gone play overseas. But we're like, whatever. It's just another tournament. This year, though, it's a complete and total Olympic preview of what our team of players who are eligible for the Olympics, like Team Canada players, which when you get steamrolled by Sweden and you lose 2-0
Well, yeah.
after
Steamrolled
35 shots on
2-0.
goal,
That's fair.
like it makes me nervous.
It's not looking good. Yeah, it's really not looking good. I looked at the roster too, and it reminds me of kind of like the Spengler Cup.
Yeah.
Where there's just no, like I'm not even sure I'm going to watch the Olympics if this is what we're going to be icing.
I'll watch the
Especially-
Olympics for other teams.
Especially especially at the time that the games will be played, it was going to be, and I mean that's a big reason why the NHL didn't want to go, because they know that North American viewership would be down. But oh man, like unless it's with the gold medal game, I don't think I want to watch Wojtek Wolski and Gilbert Brule. And I mean nothing against those guys personally, but it's just not a best on best tournament by any means, any stretch of the imagination. I bet you that our World Junior team could probably beat that Koryala Cup team, and I don't think that's a
fighting
stretch.
words.
Yeah, well, it'd be an interesting little matchup, I think.
That would actually be it's similar to like North America versus Team Canada World Cup. It's like, let's just put the kids versus the adults, like, and see what happens. But in this case, the kids would win.
Exactly.
They should do that.
And it's one of those things,
Oh, that'd
like,
be so good.
like whenever the NHL holds out of something, Canada and the U.S. just aren't going to match up against European teams as well. Especially if those leagues decide to go, like the Swedish Elite League and the Finnish Elite League. They're all great professional leagues, and a lot of Swedish and Finnish and other European players play in those. So instead of coming to the NHL, so I think we're in tough store. I really do.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I don't know if this is a tournament that people aren't taking, that the teams just aren't taking that seriously. I don't know if it's a sense of being overconfident. I mean, but when your country has never won that tournament, like, how do you even walk into that tournament? You know, like, how do you even walk into?
How do you motivate the boys to?
Yeah, how do you motivate?
I guess
them?
you could be the underdogs, but
yeah,
as Canada, it's hard to play that role.
It's hard to be the underdog every year, and also, like, I mean, it's a unique perspective. Like, for the one and only time of the year, Canada is the underdog, and we're not really used to that. And it's like, well, why try? I guess I don't know.
Well, having said that, I don't think this is like our final Olympic roster. I do.
Oh no, it's not even close. Not even close. But there's definitely players on there who are Olympic hopefuls and Olympic potentials, but a lot of that will be determined by if the OHL decides to let players go or not.
So many politics around this Olympics this year. It's crazy.
I understand the OHL's concerns. Their concerns are, we're going to let a bunch of players go to World Juniors while their games still go on. Like World Juniors happens, but like the
The league don't stop. Yeah.
yeah, that league doesn't stop. So we're gonna let a whole bunch of our players go to World Juniors, and then you're gonna take those like the top guys again, and you're gonna go and take them to the Olympics. Like,
And that's during like the playoff run.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
Down the stretch. So.
yeah, like Michael DiPietro, for example.
Right.
Like he's still playing, although he has an NHL contract. But like there are
But
players.
yeah, no, it's going to be a hard sell for sure. And then like these are all businesses. You got to think of insurance, visas, all that kind of stuff, and it's just a big headache for the leagues. So I see the logic in not sending them, but it's unfortunate for the hockey fans. That's all.
Yeah, it is. So, but I mean, like, I don't think we need to give up on the Olympics altogether. I think there are still a lot of players out there who don't have NHL contracts who are amazing, who will help lead Canada, but it's not going to be the easy sort of path. It's not going to be the easy path to the gold medal that it has been in previous years.
Yeah, far from it for sure.
It'll be a
There's-
fight. And there,
there's
and I mean, a lot of times it comes down to, okay, it's Canada versus USA, gold medal match. Something goes into overtime. Everyone is losing their minds, and then Canada wins. But like, there's a very good chance that's not going to be the case. But like I said before, I'm more interested in the Olympics for the other teams than I am for Team Canada.
Yeah, I think, and as someone who likes to see players that I rarely get to see in a kind of a scouting aspect, like for example, Rasmus Dahlin, the guy that's gonna go likely first overall this year. There's a good chance he plays for Sweden, and it's just a good showcase of him. I'll tune in to watch him play alone. So it's a good way to see guys that you'll never see before that will probably have a big impact in the league, the NHL at some point. So still worth watching, I'm sure, but gonna be hard for me to get emotionally invested, I think.
Absolutely. Well, we'll wait to see the rosters and see how the rosters progress and make a decision there. Do you have any World Juniors thoughts? Or, I mean, we're kind of in a holding pattern right now until we find out who the rosters are, who's on the roster, which will be coming out soon. These rosters are going to get announced pretty soon.
Yeah, well, there's a very big the Canada-Russia showcase is one of those, I think, under the radar little tournament. You could call it a tournament as well. That happens every year before the World Juniors. That's one of my favorite events because you get to see the top. It's basically a tryout for the World Juniors, and you get to see 3 different teams from the WHL, the OHL, and the QMJHL face Russians that have come over from Russia, and also Russians that are play in those leagues against teammates. So I've been watching. I caught a little bit of the WHL game and the OHL game, and they play again next week. So yeah, I think we're gonna have a good team this year. To be honest, I can't remember the last time the group has had this much experience because there's guys like Sam Steele, Cody Glass. These are good players. Nick Suzuki. But there's a lot of guys that are in their draft plus 2 years. And a lot of the times we don't see they're not either not in junior anymore, they're in the NHL, or they're just not good enough if they're not performing their draft plus 2 years to make the team. So these guys have been there before, like McLeod from New Jersey is another example. And there's not going to be any player on this roster that hasn't been drafted by an NHL team, I don't think. So they're a mature group. A lot of them are going to be returning from last year, and I don't know. I like our chances. I do.
So I have a fun stat homework idea for you.
Okay, here we go.
And this would be interesting, and it's going back to your junior team versus Karjala Cup team. Stat by stat, player by player, like full on just comparison, literal just analytics comparison, roster versus roster.
Oh, of Karjala Cup versus versus the World Juniors.
Yeah, once that comes out.
Okay, I'll have to. Yeah, I guess I'll compare it to their junior days because that's the
Yeah.
only.
Yeah.
Because you have to, you know what I mean.
Or, but like, yeah. I mean, figure out how to do it. I'll leave it with you. I'll leave it with you how
I'd
you
have
want
to
to
do it
structure
at
it.
the same age that the World Junior guys are now. But that's an interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I like that, Phil.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be interesting because then it would actually prove your point that, on an analytics level, I mean, we've talked about this before where analytics aren't everything, but from a very analytical standpoint, you could compare both rosters and you could probably conclude that the World Juniors roster is better than the Karyala Cup roster.
Yeah, and because they've got 19, 18-year-old legs and not 30 plus legs.
Right. Right. Well, there's that. So there might have to be some age adjustment, something like that. Like there might have to be some
Right.
little pieces taken into consideration. I would also, and then you could also take like by the end of the World Juniors, you can take win losses and actually say like, in theory, technically, like this team would have won over this team on paper.
Like if we were doing an EA Sports simulation.
Exactly.
All right.
No problem.
Well, I will say one last thought about the World Juniors. I think where we really stand out, and we always do stand out in any international play, is with our defense. I think the Americans are probably going to have the best line in the tournament with Middlestat, Logan Brown, and Kyler Yamamoto. Those are three very good players. But we have depth, and like I said, our D. We've got on the right side Cal Foote, Dante Fabro, Cale Makar, who are likely, Kel Clegg, guys like that. So we can usually ice at least 9. There's competition for 9 defensemen or so to make the team. That would be like almost shoo-ins on a lot of other teams. So I think that's where we stand out, and it's going to come down to Carter Hart in the end. He's a very good goalie prospect for the Flyers, but I like our chances, like I said.
Excellent. One last sort of interesting Olympic roster question. Do you think Mitch Marner makes the Olympic roster? If NHLers could go to the Olympics, do you think Mitch Marner makes the roster?
No, not this year. I don't think there's any chance he would, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree entirely.
It's too
I just wanted
competitive.
to see.
Like maybe Canada B team, but even then,
yeah.
Like it's like Steven Stamkos is going to be on. Well, I mean, this year he would be on a higher line. It's a bad example, but I don't know. A guy like Mark Scheifele would be on the third line, probably.
Yeah, it's such a stacked team.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's insane. Okay, so tournament talk. We were gonna have some pew 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 sounds. We didn't get those figured out. So anyway, we've chatted tournament. Let us know your thoughts about the tournaments. What tournaments are you watching this year? Are you actually paying attention to the Karyala Cup? What are you excited for World Juniors? Talk to us. You can tweet at us at the NHO Show, and we'll talk and we'll chat. So we put out a tweet the other day. On Thursday, I was at a You Can Play event. And if you don't know You Can Play, you should check them out. You Can Play is an incredible organization that promotes LGBTQ athletes in sports, specifically in hockey. And it works at all levels of hockey, from minor to the NHL, in creating a safe and inclusive space for LGBTQ, etc. athletes. This is something that's near and dear to my heart, and I really appreciate the NHL for stepping up. I know we've criticized the NHL in the past for not only stepping up on certain issues and not stepping up on other issues. I'm really happy that they've taken a stand to this, and it's all thanks. A big part of it is thanks to Brian Burke and him being so open and honest about his late son Brendan, who was gay. So I was at a You Can Play event on Thursday, and there were some really amazing, we have Harrison Brown, who's the first openly trans athlete in pro sports. Harrison has transitioned from female to male, is in that process, and such an incredibly well-spoken individual that with a lot of really great positive messages, but is also not afraid to show the harsher side of backlash and people not accepting him for who he is.
Right.
Brendan Shanahan was on the panel, which was great. There was a member of the Toronto Gay Hockey League, and then there was also a woman there who was an ex-hockey player, professional hockey player, and then also has gone into reffing. So it was just an interesting difference of experiences, but all of the opinions were the same, and the opinions were we need to create more inclusive spaces to a point where we don't need to have something like You Can Play, and we don't need to have something
Right.
like a Toronto Gay Hockey League, because it's not a thing anymore. Anyway, it was
Yeah,
an interesting.
I think it's great that the league's so involved with this, like you said, and Brian Burke's a really big champion of these kind of issues, and yeah, I think it's huge importance just to be blunt and to be honest about what's going on, and obviously they're going to face discrimination, and by I think talking about it and getting the issues out in the open and discussing them, I think that's the way to kind of make that stop, because I think 2017 we're on the right track, but we're not there yet. We haven't had a chance to talk about this, so like I think it's interesting. I didn't even know that there was a Toronto Gay Hockey League. I think that's pretty cool. But what was your biggest takeaway from being at the event, since I wasn't able to make it?
I think a couple of things that I took away from it was just the idea that that gay players have been in the league since the first puck drop. Like, there's always been gay players. It's just only recently where players have started to become open about their sexuality. And it's only really in the last 10 years that it's become an inclusive space where athletes are being reprimanded for things that they say on the ice, for slurs that they say on the ice, or in any sport, or on any surface. And that's something we all need to remember and need to consider, is that it's really going to make a difference the day an NHL player comes out as gay. That's what's going to make the difference. That's when people are going to say, "Oh, okay, this is real. Like,
And
this is in my face now,
I wouldn't
and
be
I
surprised.
can't ignore it."
I would be surprised if there was at least one player in the history of the league that is gay. Or that
there's got to be.
You know what I mean?
There has to be.
Yeah, just pure statistics, But maybe at the time they played, it wasn't socially, accepted for them to come out openly and blah blah blah. But so yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting to watch to see how this progresses. But it's great. I think great that the league's involved, like I said, but kind of brings it back to the point where if it doesn't affect them directly, they kind of just ignore it. So it's good that they're involved in these issues, but I think they can do better with other issues as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the other sort of takeaways from this is, and I say this a lot, it's like, you can post on Facebook and you can post to Twitter and you can say, on social media, I support this and I support this and I support this and this is a cause that I support, and that's great. And you can post a rant, or you can get upset and you can post it to social media. And your voice is important. And a lot of times using social media is a great way to convey a message. But it doesn't make a difference unless you actually go out and preach and actually do what you preach. So if you support LGBTQ athletes and you want to see a more inclusive space being created for them and being provided for LGBTQ athletes, you need to actually act on that. You need to be part of your community, and you need to understand what the actual issues are around these around like that LGBTQ athletes live with and deal with every single day. And just people, like it's actually not just athletes, but it's people. And you need to be involved, and you need to and you don't necessarily have to go out and, picket or like hold up a sign in front of something. It's literally saying, when you hear something negative being said, to say something, and to say, hey, that's not okay when you call this person that. It's not okay when when you're on the ice and someone goes and like checks you really hard and you call them, a motherfucker. This is the experience, or this is the example Brian Burke gave. It's like, if they go and, do something to you on the ice, and you come back with them with something, mean and nasty, and you curse, and you may say something inappropriate, it's on your teammates and it's on that person to say, hey, that's not okay for you to say. And it's on the coaches for them to say, that's not okay for you to say. We don't tolerate that language on our bench. And it's something that as you get older and older, it's harder and harder to undo. But if you just start with minor hockey and you start with young people and you educate them and you create inclusive spaces starting with young kids, they're going to grow up with inclusive spaces. Minds aren't born closed. You close them. When you're born, you're 4 or 5, your mind is open. Everyone is your best friend, and it doesn't matter if they're boy, girl, or whatever. It's like, you're my friend, I like to play with you. Great, let's play. Let's eat dirt. Sweet. That's the idea. And I think we all need to go, as we get older, we create these walls and we create these ideas, and we just need to sometimes go back to the idea of, what was it like when we were 4, when we just wanted to play in the dirt, and how we just loved everybody, and it didn't matter who they were. So that's kind of the big takeaway, is like, we need to all be more proactive in creating safe and inclusive spaces, and a lot of that starts with the way we talk.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, to your point, like during that, what you were saying, I wonder how once, because we've seen it with certain words already, like, forgive me, pardon my French here, but like fag, for example, how was a regular thing for people to say, not even 5 years ago, probably, and didn't have such a negative connotation attached to it. But now, as soon as anyone hears anyone say that word in a negative tone, then they're the ones that are being reprimanded now. You know what I mean? So like those kind of steps, once that actually enters the ice rink, it'll be interesting to see how, chirps are adjusted to not offend. Chirps are meant to offend, so it's going to be interesting to see how that side of the game kind of deals with it, because that's going to be the hardest hump, because you get heated, there's a lot of emotion involved, and when you're battling with someone and to get them off their game or what have you, you say things that obviously you wouldn't say in any other situation. But it's going to be interesting to see how the athletes adjust to that kind of barrier. And you can say that they shouldn't chirp each other, but that's kind of like telling someone not to breathe,
No, there's always going to be chirps.
It's going to happen,
but it can be.
There's always going to be chirps, but I'm interested to see how they adjust. I'm not obviously I'm not saying that any chirps like that are warranted at all, but they definitely are said, and I'm sure they will continue to be said for a while. But what do you chirp someone about?
Yeah, but you can chirp them. You don't want to be. You can chirp someone, I think, without being insensitive. You can offend, but you need to be sensitive to people and sensitive to, to who they are. and yeah, it goes from there.
Yeah, I think, well, my biggest thing when it comes to bullying and like, making fun of people, what have you, you should never pick on somebody for something they can't control. That's my biggest thing. If my friend makes a stupid decision on his own accord, I'm definitely going to rip into him a little bit because, he could have made a better decision, he or she, For something like that, when it's
Who
it's
they
just
are.
it's just it's just making a judgment based on things that you don't understand. So I'm with you, Store. I agree that I like the game. It's a good way to do it, but create.
Right. All right. Well, that was another very exciting episode of the NHO show. We'll leave it at that. It's gotten intense. It's gotten a little crazy. We'd love to know what you think, of course. So follow us at the NHO Show on Twitter. You can check us out on Facebook, the NHO Show. Storie and Colin here giving you the new hockey order and where it goes from there.